This is the Veteran Woman Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to empowering, inspiring, and encouraging veteran women to overcome their struggles and celebrate their successes. Now, here's your host, the one and only Airial.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Veteran Woman Podcast. I am your host, Airial, and today I have Jennifer on the line. Now, this interview is a little bit different than some of the other ones because we are working with an anonymous source today. So you won't hear me read out her bio, but she will give you a little bit more about herself, whatever she likes to share. So go ahead, Jennifer. And welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what would you like to tell us about yourself?
Well, I am a veteran. I served almost 7 years, and I'm in my 30s now. And I am a military trauma sexual survivor. And I was assaulted in the early 2000s, and it made a great impact on my life in a negative way.
Yeah.
But I have used that negativity, and I have tried to. It's not easy. I have to do it every day, but using the negativity as, when people throw stones at you, you can stack them and stand above. And that's kind of been my motto in life.
I love that. Now, we were talking a little bit earlier. We were talking about how, transitioning out of the military and finding yourself and rediscovering what it is that you love to do, and that whole identity crisis that we go through even throughout life. You want to talk about that a little bit more? Because you said you had some good nuggets of information. But of course, I wasn't recording.
Oh, it's okay. I had wanted to join the military since I was a little girl, and it was always very strange because nobody in my family really had any military service. And to me, like so many others, I'm sure, it felt like a calling. It felt like I was called to be there and part of my destiny. And so growing up, my identity began to kind of form around what I thought what they wanted me to be and who the military expected me to be. And I was very excited about it before I joined. And in joining, at least initially, basic training and all of that, as we all go through, it wasn't easy. And they say they break you down to build you up, and I'm still waiting for the build up part. Still waiting for that. And I guess I did wait for that until it occurred to me, especially after the MST and the sexual assault, that most likely wasn't going to happen. And that I still needed to be built up, but I needed to find a way to do it myself. Mm-hmm. And I could give, explicit details and go into a long, huge story about the details of what happened, but I'm trying not to focus on that because what happened. And, for anybody else out there listening, you can't change the past, and you can't go back in time and do something differently or try to change the events of what happened. It's a part of our history now. But, with adversity comes courage and strength. And in that courage and strength, I see it a lot like the phoenix rising. The phoenix comes from ashes and being burnt up, and, that's not a comfortable place to be, but it comes out this beautiful, miraculous bird. And that is still an opportunity for so many of us who have gone through the fire. And the biggest thing I have been focusing on lately, at least for myself, is to realize the military doesn't define you. You define you. And I believe in a higher power, and it's not required by any stretch for anybody, with the story that I'm telling. But I believe I have certain gifts and talents that are innate, and maybe they couldn't flourish under a military environment. And now that I'm out, I get to discover certain parts of myself, of gifts and talents, and new things that I'm learning to be good at, improving upon things that I didn't get to do while I was in service, and using that as a platform to redefine myself so that I can come to peace with the past. And instead of seeing it as a blow to the ego or a blow to who I am internally, again, using it as a stepping stone and a launching pad to be who I really believe I was meant to be, my real destiny. Everything that happened up to this point, it served a purpose, whether it was comfortable or uncomfortable.
You were talking about, I know you don't want to get into too many details, but so you were in the military when the MST happened. Did you report it at that time? Did you report it while you were in the military?
I was forced to report it. And they said that they gave me anonymity when I reported it, and they didn't. So I felt incredibly betrayed and exposed at that time. And, up until the reporting and the MST incident, I was maybe even naive about the military, being a good woman, good man, and everybody looks out for each other, family and camaraderie. Well, it is to an extent. It is until you're raped.
Yeah.
And then there's a dark side to military and MSC, where we realize that two faces, their professional face and then what they really think about you being a victim, and they treat you accordingly. And the point I want to really emphasize is that what other people think of us is really none of our business, whether it's positive or negative. And how people treat you is a reflection of them and not you. And the military has some growing up to do in a big way. And that all of that negativity, because we were innocent and we didn't deserve what happened to us, we're still innocent, when it comes to that. And we're still precious. And we still have a lot to offer the world. And that our military service, for better or worse, does not define. We define who we are. We get to define who we are every day, every minute, every second. And if we don't like something, we can always change it. If we do like something, we can capitalize upon it, push further, push harder. We have a wonderful skill set coming from the military. It wasn't all bad. We're strong. We're survivalists. We're organized. We're efficient. We're tough. Those skills don't just magically disappear. They can be applied in so many different areas of life to bring success. So I don't regret my military service at all. And I don't even regret the assault because I know it wasn't my fault. There's nothing to regret. I didn't do anything wrong. I just understand now, and it's been 10 to 15 years later, that none of that defines me. It happened. It was horrible. But so many bad things happen to people all over the world, all over the time. We have to persevere. We have to persevere and figure out what our real calling is. What is a calling? I think it's something that resonates with you, that you feel passionate about, that you want to do for yourself or others, that you can just throw yourself into for hours and hours and hours, and as a labor of love. And there's still so much out there in the world to experience. The military isn't the end all be all, right. And sooner or later we all separate from the military. I mean, you can't be 100 years old and still serving,
Some people try.
Yes, people try. But sooner or later you have to let that image, that part of your life go anyway. Whether your enlistment is up or your commission is up, or whether you get retired out or whether you get forced out, one way or another, military service wasn't meant to be forever. Right. So, and I see a lot of veterans, especially MST veterans, who hold on to who they used to be, not paying attention to who they are now and what they can do now.
And how did you work through finding out who you are now after service?
I had to make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
I tried to do things that I used to do in the military, like attitudes and judgments towards other people, judgments towards myself, that just weren't working anymore. They weren't giving me the results that I wanted. And I remember when I first got out, there was some separation anxiety. Mm-hmm. There really was. Mm-hmm. And it was without my uniform, who am I? You know, without my commission, who am I? You know, without the U.S. government telling me what to do every 5 seconds, who am I?
Right.
And it was very difficult. And there's this thing I believe in. It's called the dark night of the soul. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
It's kind of a phenomenon. So the dark night of the soul is when you have reached a point in life where you look back, you're looking backwards at the past, and you realize this just doesn't work anymore. It's not working for me. If I keep doing this, I'm going to get the same result. I don't know how to change this. And so moving forward from the past, you're kind of stuck in limbo because the thing ahead of you is the future, and you're not quite sure how that's going to pan out either. There's a lot of, you know, when's the shoe going to drop and fear of the unknown.
Exactly.
So you're kind of stuck in limbo. You're stuck in limbo. And I call that the dark night of the soul. And I spent years there. I spent years in the dark night of the soul knowing that what had happened to me and what I had been through wasn't going to work for me moving on in the future. But I was too afraid to make the changes that I needed to make in order to move on. And the thing is, though, is that there really is no turning back. The past is the past. And if you continue to repeat it, you're going to get the same result. So you have no choice but to move through the future. But it takes a lot of courage, and it takes some faith. It takes some faith in yourself and in understanding that things can get better. And you can do things differently and get different results. You may have to teach yourself, like I had to teach myself how to do things differently, especially with a PTSD diagnosis and some other diagnoses that I have now. I had to learn how to adapt and live with it and rise above in spite of it. And once I started accepting that my future meant more to me than ruminating about the past, I started making progress.
So, of course, our past shapes us, it teaches us, and it drives us in our future. Even though we don't want to dwell on the past or be victims of the things that have happened to us, how has the MST and your military service, how does that drive you now to help others?
You know, humiliation and humility have the same root word, and it's humble.
Mm-hmm.
It's humble. At any point in our lives, it helped me to realize, number one, I wasn't the only one to go through that. You know, and I think it's great that you're doing this podcast to let other people know that, number one, you are not alone. This happens all around the world. Sexual assault, whether it's in military or not, happens all around the world. What's the statistic now? Like 1 in 3 women will be sexually assaulted in their life. That's a lot. That is a lot of women. That's a phenomenon that women.
And it doesn't matter your color, your creed, your race, your ethnicity, your social class. It happens all through the ranks. Like you said, all over the world.
It happens all over the world. And women, you know, it's a horrific thing to experience, but it doesn't define you. I find that in my own personal journey, when I let myself be that victim and really dwelled on being a victim, and that began to become my identity, my life shut down. I stopped feeling joy. I stopped feeling peace. I stopped moving forward. I stopped achieving things. I stopped making goals because I was focused on being a victim instead of a survivor. And I have a life coach who's trying to help me move forward from survivor to thriver. Just like in those survivor shows, you know, they have adversity all around them. They have people picking at them, trying to vote them off the village. There's adversity everywhere. But at the end of it, the one who's standing, the one who wins the show is the one who persevered and didn't allow their being a victim to stop them. They moved into a survivor. And at the end of the show, they became the thriver. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. I'm trying to thrive, to succeed, to extend, to excel, to use all the terrible things that have happened in my life as a way of connecting with others who have been through the same thing. I think that's that being humbled portion.
Definitely. Now, I know some people listening to this, they may say, well, that's easy for her to say. If you're willing to, can you share with us, what do you do when you have those bad days or those hard times and those days that you just want to give up? What do you say to yourself? What do you do that pushes you through to the next day?
Well, when I call them my spin outs or my episodes, because I still have them. They still get the best of me, and they humble me. They humble me and bring me back down. Like, girl, this is a lifelong process. The first thing I try to figure out is, okay, I'm stuck here. This is uncomfortable. I don't like this. Is there anything I can do on my own to bring myself out of it? And if I can, I do it. If it's distracting myself with television, if it's going for a walk, if it's petting my animals, if it's prayer, if it's writing in a journal, I try to use as many coping skills as I have learned, thankfully through therapy, to see if I can pull myself out of it. If that doesn't work, because it doesn't always work, I mean, trauma brain is nothing to be messed with.
Right.
Trauma brain is very difficult to deal with. And that's when I reach out for help. And I am fortunate to have a tribe. I call them, like, your vibe attracts your tribe. I have a tribe of individuals who understand what I have been through, because maybe they have been through it too, or they're sympathetic, or they're just a listening ear, or they just care. And reaching out and speaking to one of my tribal members about what's going on with me. And usually that usually is enough for me. I'm a talker, so talking about it has helped me put things in perspective and really process through what's going on with me inside, because sometimes there are no words. But sometimes if you can find words, at least to even describe what's going on, it makes a difference. So you can start to make a solution or an action plan,
Right. And so, speaking of tribe and support system, because support system is definitely very important and vital to the healing process, how did you find your tribe? I reached out. I reached out into the MST community on Facebook, and was so fortunate and blown away initially by the amount of support I found from people who were advocates, were survivors, were sympathizers, who genuinely wanted to help, and they still want to help. And I'm a firm believer in that saying, it takes a village. We all need a tribe. We all need a village. We're not alone. We weren't meant to be alone. We're meant to have human interaction and work together and help each other, and allowing other people to pull my hand up when I couldn't stand up. And that's hard sometimes, with pride and I got this, and I don't want to burden people with my problems. I don't want people to know my business. I mean, there's so many things that are barriers to reaching out to help, but transcending those barriers, there's really a blessing at the end of it. That's that extra support, knowing that you don't have to do it by yourself. I mean, in the obstacle course and basic training, I remember there were certain portions that you had to do alone, and there were other portions that you had to do with others. You couldn't get around it without others' help, like the wall. Couldn't get around that wall without somebody reaching down and helping you over and somebody lifting you up. That's life. Yes.
It's the same.
Yes.
It's the same thing.
Definitely. But how do you get the courage to reach out because like you said, it's hard with pride and not wanting people to know your business or being ashamed. How do you get to that point where you say, okay, hey, this is my story. I need help. I need support. What does that look like, that process?
For me, I had to trust that there were people at that time that were smarter and maybe more experienced and more efficient and more stable than I was at that time. And I had to trust in them. It's a trust thing. It's very hard. But I think to start out with trusting anybody, you have to take a risk. You have to be willing to take that risk that If I trust you, I trust that you're not going to hurt me, at least not on purpose, you know?
Right.
I have to trust that you're not going to hurt me, and I have to trust that you genuinely want to help, and I have to trust that maybe you'll make a difference. And that's it. You kind of have to close your eyes and squeeze your hands and just jump in. Because what's the alternative? It's like that dark night of the soul again. What's the alternative? To continue to do what you've always done and not get anywhere? You know it's not working.
Yeah. So we have to take that risk to make a mistake.
Yes, and connect.
In order to, and even make mistakes, be willing to make mistakes, even though it's scary as hell. But that means we're trying and we're moving forward. And that's the only way that we get out of that endless loop of being a victim and victim mentality and depression and all of that. And to anybody listening, I'm not saying it's easy by any means, because like Jennifer said, I have bad days too. And sometimes I just go to a quiet space, or like she said, journal, or pet my dog or cat or whatever, and push through and reach out to people who you know that support you. And it is hard. It is difficult. It's difficult to reach out. It's difficult to admit. It's a lot of shame attached to it. It's a lot of fear of the unknown. But I do agree, you have to step out on faith. No matter who your higher source is or what you believe, you just have to step out on faith. Just like when you go across the bridge, you have faith that you'll make it to the other side. That's what we have to do in life, is step out on faith and cross that bridge and make it to the other side, which is a lot better than staying in this rocky place that we're in.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to what you were saying. Like, it's scary to reach out because you're not in control anymore. You're allowing somebody else to help you. But it's also just as terrifying to stay where you are, knowing that you're going to get the same result. Mm-hmm. You know, if it were Vegas, I would bet my odds on reaching out. You know?
And I like how you said, oh, I forgot. My brain just left me for some reason. Okay, can you repeat what you just said? I don't know how I just...
Oh, I just said if I had to take Vegas bets on reaching out for help or staying stuck in my traumatic brain that's trying to kill me, I have better odds on reaching out.
Right.
It may not be perfect. It may not be what I expect. It may not even be what I really want or how I, expect it to go. But it's a better bet than staying stuck.
Right. I think it was something else you said that it triggered something, but I completely forgot. I guess my brain is just having one of those days today. But oh well, we will move on. So what would be your biggest piece of advice? I know you've given a lot of useful information and a lot of ways to move forward and not be inundated with everything that goes with being a victim, but actually moving into survivorship and thriveship, if those are even words. I'm making them up today. But what would be your biggest piece of advice?
My biggest piece of advice is that any horrific crime that happened to you, number one, was not your fault. And because it was not your fault, there is no shame and no guilt attached to the situation. You were not responsible for what happened. It happened to you. Nobody wants that to happen to them. Nobody deserves to have that happen to them. And just because it happened to you, number one, you're not alone. It happens all around the world. So many millions and millions of people have experienced this. Just think of that number of 1 million, just 1 million. How many people that is? That's a city. A city full of people have been through what you have been through. And number two, just because it happened, it doesn't have to define you for the rest of your life in any way. You can use the skills that you have to learn in order to pull yourself away from the hurt and pain. Those skills will last you a lifetime. And it's a good skill set. It's a skill set that will help you move forward and bring you to a new beginning and to new dreams, new ambitions. For me, I thought the military was the end-all be-all of my character, my personality, who I was. I wasn't always that person. I was a young girl. I was in high school. I still was trying to learn who I was. The military tried to tell me who I was, especially after the MST. I rejected it, and it took me 10 years to reject it. It took me at least 10 years to reject that I am better, and I am more intact, and I am stronger, and I am special, and I am worthy of a new beginning, and to find who I really am. Don't let these people, don't let the haters, don't let the perpetrators, don't let the naysayers, and don't let those who don't understand and are callous and cold, don't let them define you, because they don't. We define ourselves. One of my favorite artists is Madonna, okay? And I love Madonna because every few years she redefines herself. She changes it up. She completely changes it up and redefines herself, and she's current and new. We can all do the same thing every day. It may not happen overnight, but if we put that effort in, we can redefine ourselves whenever we want.
Wow. Thank you. And I would definitely love to have you on again. I know this was kind of an ad hoc interview. We went from phone call to immediate interview or conversation. I don't even know why I call them interviews. It's more like conversations. And I would definitely love to have you again because I know you have so much to share. And so for now, unless you have anything else you would like to share, I am going to go ahead and say thank you. Do you have anything else you like to share before we end?
We are not alone. You're not alone. Your vibe attracts your tribe. There's a tribe of people out there that get it, that understand, that may have even been through worse than you. And we're not doomed. It's not a death sentence over life. We can overcome this. We totally can. It's not easy by any stretch. But what's the alternative? The alternative is just to stay where you are. You know, that's the alternative. And like we talked about earlier, you can't be looking in the past and looking forward at the same time. You have to pick one.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Veteran Woman Podcast. If you want to connect with Airial and let her know what you thought of today's show, be sure to head over to www.theveteranwoman.com and follow her on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @The Veteran Woman.